Bumper-to-bumper traffic crawls through intersections. Commuter trains pack platforms every 2 minutes. Towering billboards flash across concrete facades, and pedestrians navigate the sidewalks with their eyes glued to handheld screens. A young kid standing right beside you stares at the archival video, looks up with genuine confusion, and asks, "Why on earth did people live down there?" You pause, caught off guard. To a child raised in this era, living at ground level sounds just as primitive and uninviting as living in a cave sounds to us. The leap into the clouds was never just about futuristic ambition or runaway tech speculation. The real catalyst was sheer climate survival. Over the course of the late 21st century, ocean levels crept higher. Baseline temperatures pushed the limits of human endurance, and superstorms battered coastal hubs with unprecedented force. For a sprawling waterfront capital, the status quo simply became untenable. City planners and civic leaders faced a binary choice: managed retreat or total structural reinvention. Tokyo chose to build its way out. Massive seawalls went up. Industrial drainage pumps became permanent civic fixtures, and subterranean overflow vaults expanded to historic proportions. Yet, fortifying the shoreline could only buy so much time. The entire blueprint of civilization had to pivot. Agricultural production climbed into the superstructure. Microgrids moved skyward. High-speed transit lifted off the pavement, and day-to-day life followed suit. That transformation came with an undeniable social cost. Upward mobility became quite literal, and not everyone held the equity to secure a place in the upper tiers. The highest levels offered cleaner air, cooler ambient microclimates, storm-hardened power redundancy, premier health networks, and top-tier school districts. The base of the city told an entirely different story. Millions remained anchored to the lower elevations, occupying legacy districts and working essential service roles. Over time, an economic divide hardened between the sky tiers and the ground floor. Up above lies clean air, frictionless transit pods, landscaped terraces, and state-of-the-art living pods. Down below, residents navigate decaying concrete, relentless humidity, chronic flooding, and surging maintenance surcharges. Humanity climbed upward, but the elevators did not carry everyone to the same altitude. By 5:40 p.m., the workday winds down. Before heading back to your unit, you stop by an expansive sky park suspended 70 floors in the air. Maomori, mature pine trees root into synthetic soil. Songbirds weave between structural trusses. Kids run across manicured lawns, and office workers unwind on benches as the evening fog rolls across the lower decks. From here, the engineering looks entirely invincible. A high-priority alert flashes across the overhead glass partitions. Severe atmospheric disturbance approaching. The park immediately triggers a shutdown sequence. Commuters move toward the transit hubs. Automated exterior storm shutters seal off public terraces. Logistics drones return to designated hangars, and magnetic rail routes dynamically reroute. The entire metropolis seamlessly shifts into defensive mode because a storm is no longer just bad weather. It is an existential stress test on civil infrastructure. At 7:03 p.m., the squall slams into the towers. Gale force gusts barrel through the structural corridors, and sheets of rain pound the reinforced glass panels. Inside your unit, you feel entirely insulated until the ambient lighting flickers once, then twice. The main interface panel resets to a black backdrop, flashing a stark red diagnostic. Grid load critical. Within seconds, an auxiliary transit loop drops off the network, followed by a secondary power branch. Select sectors immediately switch to reserve battery banks. For the first time, the hidden vulnerability of hyperengineering becomes painfully clear. When every system is universally integrated, a single point of failure can trigger a cascade across the entire grid. By 7:27 p.m., the magnetic lines across the 143rd sky deck go dark. leaving thousands of commuters stranded on the platforms. The central network AI works overtime routing alternative pedestrian flow, while crowds begin navigating the interior sky bridges on foot. Then another alert pushes to the network feed. Surface basin. Water surge detected. The terminal area falls dead silent. The storm is not merely straining the power grid overhead, it is hitting the foundation of the old world. Coastal tide gates lock down, heavy-duty drainage turbines fire up at maximum output, and first responder drones deploy into the lower atmosphere. The city finds itself fighting a war on two fronts, an electrical overload in the clouds and a catastrophic surge at sea level. At 8:16 p.m., the gale continues to howl through the towers. You look down from the observation glass, peering straight into the lower districts below the cloud line. Whole blocks have plunged into darkness. Brown floodwaters surge through legacy streets, and searchlights from emergency skiffs cut through the downpour as rescue drones sweep over flooded intersections. Looking out at the storm, the reality of the century becomes unmistakable. Lifting an entire metropolis into the sky may have engineered a future for the city, but it never fully insulated the people left at the bottom. Around midnight, the gale force winds finally begin to taper off. The municipal power grid balances out. Automated transit routes, initialized diagnostic booths, and the sky decks gradually illuminate as the high-altitude skyline comes back to life. By sunrise, the workforce will commute along the magnetic sky bridges. Children will file into vertical classrooms. The manicured terrace parks will clear for visitors, and everyday life will resume without missing a beat. Tokyo's defining trait has never been absolute flawlessness. It has always been an unmatched capacity for structural reinvention and resilience. Yet as you lie back in your living quarters, a lingering thought refuses to fade. If civilization ultimately retreats into the stratosphere, what becomes of the foundation left behind? Perhaps untamed wilderness will claim the abandoned asphalt. Ocean tides will carve out new shorelines. Historical boulevards will be preserved like living dioramas, and the heart of modern civilization will turn into ancient foundations buried beneath monolithic towers. A child raised a mile above sea level might one day gaze through an observation pane at the weathered grid below, listening as a parent points into the distance and says, "That is where everyone used to live." The child will look back in sheer disbelief, asking why anyone would ever settle down there in the first place, only to be met with a stark truth. They simply had no other option. When we envision the next century, we picture gravity-defying architecture, self-regulating structural networks, fully autonomous transit matrices, high-yield vertical agriculture, and clean energy grids that feel almost miraculous. Yet, future generations might look back at our 21st century lifestyle with the same quiet bewilderment we reserve for early industrial boomtowns. Suffocating smog, gridlocked highways, sprawling suburban sprawl, and billions of people constrained by a horizontal world never built to sustain modern human scale. That technological leap brings an uncomfortable dilemma. When we engineer environments that are exponentially safer, smarter, and more resilient, do we actually expand human freedom, or do we just construct a more elegant cage? Leaving the surface behind does not erase human nature. The classic struggles over capital allocation, resources, civic equity, and political leverage will not simply vanish at higher elevations. The question of who earns the right to live above the storm clouds and who remains at ground level will remain fundamentally unresolved. At 12:47 a.m., the metropolis settles into a quiet hum twal. 2,000 feet below, the ruins of the 20th century fade into the shadows, while the superstructure above burns bright against the night sky. As your eyes close, the residential interface dims the ambient lights, offering a quiet, synthesized sign-off. Good night. The living quarters go dark, but the skyline never sleeps. By the turn of the century, Tokyo is no longer just a physical habitat. It is an active extension of human civilization itself. The real mystery of the future is not just how high our cities can climb, but what parts of our humanity we might have to surrender on the way up.